Hi, my name is Ava Morgan. I am 31 years old and I live in Salt Lake City. This Thanksgiving, I thought it would be just like all the years before, a noisy dinner in Tulsa, the main table filled with laughter, while I quietly tried to exist at the side table. But instead of an invitation, what I received was a short message from my mother. Only your sister's family this year. You're not needed. 11 words, cold as a door slammed in my face, enough to pull me back to being 14 again. Christmas without a gift, my science award overshadowed by Sloan's debate trophy, and my parents' eyes never truly resting on me. I didn't argue, and I didn't beg. I simply replied with one word. Sure. But in that moment, another kind of resolve sparked inside me. I would not sit alone in my apartment again. Because for the past 2 years, I had quietly built something no one in my family knew about: a $7 million mountain lodge in Jackson Hole. It wasn't just a house, but proof that I could set my own table where everyone had a seat and a name. And this year, I would open those doors, inviting all the people who had been cast aside, so we could have a Thanksgiving not centered on the perfect sister, but on those who truly chose to show up. Have you ever been excluded by your own family, feeling like you never really belonged? If you have, leave me a comment and tell me where you're listening from, so I'll know that on this journey. I am not alone. My childhood was tied to a small house in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where every holiday seemed to revolve around my sister, Sloan. From the time she was in elementary school, she was the pride my parents could easily show off to the neighbors, the cheerleader with the perfect smile, the class president adored by teachers, and most importantly, the daughter who never strayed from the orbit my parents had drawn for her. Sloan chose a school close to home, spent time with friends my mother approved of, and dressed in the way my father considered proper. I was the opposite. I loved tinkering with old circuit boards in the garage, pulling apart cassette players, twisting wires together, and spending hours staring at the flickering screen of an ancient computer my father once tried to throw away. To my parents, none of that was worth showing off. In their eyes, I was a strange, out-of-place child, not easy to parade around like Sloan. I still remember Christmas when I was 14. The tree glowed with lights as always, gifts stacked high underneath, and the whole house buzzed with excitement as Sloan opened a turquoise jewelry box. Inside was a gold bracelet my mother had ordered months in advance, a gift that made the relatives gasp in admiration. I bent down to search for my own present, but all I found was a crumpled pair of wool socks shoved into a paper bag. I forced a smile, telling myself maybe my parents had been too busy, maybe I shouldn't expect too much. But that smile only made my cheeks burn hotter with shame. In that brightly lit room, I felt like nothing more than a shadow present, but never truly seen. Another time, when I won first place at the state science fair for building a simple circuit that could transmit radio signals, I rushed home, eager to share the news. But only minutes later, when my mother began telling everyone about Sloan winning a debate competition at her high school, the entire dinner shifted in that direction. The adults laughed, nodded, praised her for having leadership qualities, while my own victory was brushed aside as nothing more than a trivial pastime. That night, I lay awake in my dark bedroom, clutching the stiff certificate in my hand, realizing with a sharp ache that I couldn't yet put into words. Nothing I did was ever enough to make them look at me the way they looked at her. Those scratches never faded, they layered on top of each other over the years. I slowly learned how to swallow my silence, never boasting, never waiting for praise, burying myself instead in the world of computers where at least the code was honest. Type it right, it runs. Type it wrong, it shows an error. In programming, I found something my family never gave me: fairness. But deep down, I also made a vow to myself. One day, I would walk out of that house in Tulsa, step out from Sloan's shadow, and never again have to ask for a seat at the family table. That vow carried me farther than I ever imagined. It began with long nights in a dusty garage, fueled by the sting of holidays where I was forgotten, and grew into a determination that nothing could shake. I knew clearly that if I stayed, I would forever remain the unnecessary daughter in my parents' eyes. So I carved out another path, one where I would never again be the outsider peering through the window. I left Tulsa right after graduating high school, carrying with me the vow etched into my heart. Never again would I sit on the sidelines of my own family. I had been accepted into the University of Texas at Austin with a full scholarship in computer science. On my first day stepping into the dorms, I felt small among hundreds of brilliant, ambitious students, but at the same time, I felt a weight lift off me. No one here compared me to Sloan. Here, I was just Ava Morgan, the girl who loved computers, ready to stay up all night writing code. But life away from home wasn't all freedom. The scholarship covered tuition and part of my living expenses, so I had to pick up extra jobs, monitoring the computer lab and bussing tables at a Mexican restaurant near campus. Some months I lived off instant noodles, drank cheap instant coffee instead of breakfast, and grabbed sleep on a friend's couch because I couldn't afford my own apartment. Strangely enough, those hard days made me feel more alive, more free. No longer measured against anyone else, it was just me and the goal I was determined to chase. After graduation, I moved to Salt Lake City, where the startup scene was starting to stir. 2 classmates and I began building a small company focused on healthcare data infrastructure. At first, no one cared. We knocked on hospital doors one after another, rejected more times than I could count. With barely any capital, we rented a cramped 2-bedroom apartment, spread mattresses on the floor, and took turns cooking instant noodles. Some months, the company account had just enough to pay half a salary, and I considered walking away. But in those long, exhausting nights, I thought of the girl I used to be, and of the vow I had made to never again beg for a seat at the family table. So, I clenched my teeth and kept the company alive, taking on everything myself, coding back-end systems, pitching to investors, giving presentations, even hand-delivering documents when necessary. Then the pandemic hit. The healthcare system across the United States was thrown into chaos, with supply chains for medicine and medical equipment constantly breaking down. And at that exact moment, the idea of real-time healthcare data routing that we had once been laughed at for suddenly became the thing everyone needed. Our software could detect when an emergency room in Salt Lake was running out of blood supplies and immediately coordinate a transfer from a hospital a few hours away. It meant thousands of patients didn't have to wait in desperation. From just a handful of small hospitals, we quickly expanded to more than 40 healthcare systems across 3 states in just 18 months. The company phone rang nonstop, hospitals begging for trial access to our system, while the press began calling us the back-end heroes. I didn't sleep through a single night for 2 years, but for the first time in my life, I felt that my work was truly saving lives. Breakthrough brought numbers with it. A Fortune 100 corporation reached out, asking, "What if we acquired the entire platform?" At first, I thought it was a scam. But then came the contracts, the transfers 6 figures, then 7 laid out in undeniable clarity. When the deal finally closed and the company account reflected the payment, I sat frozen in the conference room, my eyes blurring. All those years of instant noodles, nights on the floor, moments when I thought everything would collapse had all funneled into that single moment. I could have retired 3 times over, bought anything I wanted. But the first thing that came to mind wasn't a sports car or a yacht. It was a place I could truly call home, a place no one could ever push me out of again. The idea of a mountain lodge in Jackson Hole was planted that very day. I didn't brag to my family. No photos, no stories. At a family dinner not long after, sitting around the table in Tulsa, I quietly mentioned that my company had just been acquired. My parents only nodded, then immediately shifted the conversation to Sloan, who had just won a Young Lawyer of the Year award in her district. The whole room buzzed with praise, as if I didn't exist. I sat there, smiling faintly, realizing I no longer needed their applause. I had value. I had created something undeniable. And, more importantly, I no longer needed a family wall of honor to prove it. When I left that dinner, I stepped out into the cold night air, breathing deeply as the yellow light spilled from the old house. A feeling rose in me, equal parts bitterness and pride. I knew with certainty that I had broken free from the orbit they had tried to trap me in. And from that moment on, every table I sat at would be one I built myself, not one granted by anyone else. When the deal closed and the enormous sum landed in my account, I didn't buy a sports car or a penthouse apartment like so many people might. The first thing I thought of was a refuge, a place no one could push me out of, where no one had the power to decide whether I belonged. I drove to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, a place I had long admired during my short weekend trips. From a distance, the Tetons rose tall and snow-capped, like massive stone walls shielding me from the rest of the world. There, I found a stretch of land more than 30 acres wide, nestled deep in a valley so quiet I could hear nothing but the wind rushing through the pines and the steady thud of elk hooves against the snow. I knew instantly this would be where I built a home, not just to live, but to redefine myself. I hired a team of local architects, but I insisted that everything preserve the soul of the mountains and forests. After 18 months of construction, my $7 million mountain lodge stood proudly in the wilderness, so beautiful that every time I opened the door, I felt as if I were stepping into a dream. The entire frame was built from raw-washed pine, beams so large it took arms wrapped wide to encircle them, stacked like living layers of history. The front of the house was made of floor-to-ceiling glass walls, opening to an unbroken view of the Tetons. In the mornings, sunlight struck the peaks, making the snow glow as though it were on fire. At night, the sky melted into deep shades of violet, and the lodge glowed like a warm lantern in the frozen valley. The main floor was laid with thick slate, every step echoing with a heavy, resonant click, as if reminding me that everything here was built on a foundation stronger than any praise or criticism. The central hall opened into a wide kitchen, where I insisted on keeping an open design so that cooking could flow seamlessly into conversation with guests. The counters were carved from a single slab of black granite streaked with white, cold yet elegant. In the corner stood a massive granite fireplace, large enough for a person to step inside. When the logs crackled and burned, the flames reflected against the glass and cast a shimmering light onto the soaring wooden ceiling. The lodge held 12 bedrooms, each designed with its own character. One lined with pale oak, another decorated with Navajo rugs, another hung with mountain landscape photographs I had taken myself. In the basement, I built a wine cellar, shelves of wood stacked with bottles of Cabernet and Pinot Noir collected from my business trips. And in the far corner, I reserved a small private room just for me, with a walnut desk and bookshelves that reached the ceiling, a quiet reminder of all those nights in the garage back in Tulsa, tapping away at code in silence. But the feature I am proudest of isn't the kitchen or the wine cellar. It is the massive walnut table I placed right in the center of the great hall. Stretching 10 meters long, its surface is polished smooth as glass, yet it still carries the natural grain, flowing and bending like a river. It took me months to find the right tree and hire master carpenters to bring it to life. To me, this table is more than furniture. It is a symbol. For the first time in my life, I have a banquet table built by my own hands, one where no one has the power to decide whether I get to sit or not. Here, I am the one who opens the doors, I am the one who calls the names, and I am the one who decides who is worthy of a seat. I never told my parents or Sloan about the lodge, partly because I didn't want to hear comments like, "That's just luck," or "Sloan was thinking of buying a vacation home too." But more than that, I didn't want this place to become another stage where my sister was praised while I faded into the background. For years, no matter what I accomplished, somehow the spotlight always shifted back to her. I refused to let that happen again. This lodge is mine. It is the product of sleepless nights, instant noodle dinners, and years of being overlooked. It isn't a prize handed to me by anyone. It is the witness to my own journey of rewriting my fate. Each time I walk down the hallway, brushing my fingers lightly against the raw pine walls, I remember the little girl Ava who was always pushed to the kids' table during Thanksgiving dinners. Now, I have my own long table, standing tall in the heart of the mountains. And I know, one day, the time will come when I open the doors of this lodge and invite in all those who were once cast aside. And in that moment, no one will ever again be able to tell me I am not needed. INES That afternoon, as the last light of the day spilled across the lodge's glass walls and painted the tea-tins a blazing orange, I sat alone in the small library, a steaming cup of tea in front of me. My phone lay silent on the table, heavy as if it carried all the years of being left out. I couldn't let it end with that morning's message. Something in me urged to call someone, just to know for sure if it was only me who had been excluded. The first number I dialed was Theo, my cousin who was always honest and never hid his feelings. I got a message from Mom. I began when his familiar voice answered. This Thanksgiving. It's just Sloane and her family. What about you? There was a long pause, then Theo let out a dry laugh. Yeah, same here. Aunt Linda texted my mom saying they wanted to keep it small this year, immediate family only. But guess what? My family isn't invited, neither is Grandma. I closed my eyes, a mix of anger and relief washing over me. So, it wasn't just me. I called Aunt Camille next. On the other end, her voice was heavy with sadness. Sweetheart, I was just about to text you. Your aunt said this year would be easier to manage if it was only Sloane's family. I think it's so strange. Thanksgiving has never revolved around just one household. I could hear Uncle Daryl's voice in the background, cutting in, it's ridiculous. We've been going to family gatherings our whole lives, and now we're just shut out. My anger flared, but along with it came a resolve stronger than ever. I would not let this happen again. I created a separate group chat for the relatives who weren't invited by my parents and Sloane, my fingers flying across the screen. My heart pounded, but every word I typed was steady and firm. If you're not invited, then come to me. The lodge in Jackson Hole is big enough for everyone. Don't worry, I'll take care of everything. Just tell me the time. I hit send and waited, holding my breath. Less than 5 minutes later, the first reply appeared. Theo wrote, we're in. The SUV is ready. Next came Aunt Camille. Are you sure? If you are, our whole family will come. Then Uncle Ray, pumpkin pie already prepared. I'll bring it. One message after another came pouring in like a flood, my screen lighting up nonstop, my heartbeat keeping pace with every new ding. I won. But the one that made my throat tighten came from the last number, Nana Ruth. No frills, no exclamation marks. Just one line. Tell me the time so I can pack. I sat still, eyes blurring, my hand trembling as I gripped the phone. That simple sentence carried more weight than any other show of support. It wasn't just agreement. It was proof that I wasn't alone, that the table I was about to set truly meant something. I looked around the lodge, bathed in the golden glow of evening, the light glinting across the massive walnut table. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty. For the first time, the whole family would gather around a table not chosen by my parents or by Sloane, but by me. And this time, no one would be left behind. The moment the group chat exploded with confirmations, I knew I couldn't let it stop at empty promises. This lodge was never built to show off, but if it was going to open its doors to the family for the first time, then every detail had to prove that this was a true home for everyone. I called Mason, the lodge manager, and asked him to come early so we could plan together. Mason, a former Marine with a tall frame, a deep voice, and a meticulous nature down to the last screw, spread the floor plan across the walnut table. With a pencil, he marked each room. Who would stay where, which rooms for the kids, which for the adults. The goal is that no one feels shoved into a corner, I said. Mason gave a firm nod. Understood, Mom. Next, I called Harper, a local chef from Appalachia I had met at the summer farmers market. She had sun-weathered hands, a warm voice, and a passion for turning simple ingredients into unforgettable meals. I want the menu to carry the soul of the mountains, but also feel familiar enough that everyone feels at home, I told her. Harper thought for a moment, then proposed. Applewood, smoked turkey to hold both sweetness and smoke, whole salt, crusted baked potatoes, cranberry compote simmered with sage for depth, wild blueberry pie from the slopes nearby, and on the table, a steaming pot of cinnamon-spiced hot cider with a splash of bourbon to warm the spirit. Listening to her, my throat tightened not because the menu was fancy, but because it felt alive, like a long embrace after years of being lost. Decorating the lodge was the part I looked forward to most. I called a local company to bring in a 12-foot pine, chosen from the old forests of Jackson. When they raised it in the center of the Great Hall, its top nearly brushing the ceiling, the scent of fresh resin filled the air, stirring childhood memories, but this time without the sting of being left out. Mason and I strung golden lights across its branches, wrapped garlands around the balcony, weaving in clusters of bright red berries. Outside on the porch, hundreds of tiny bulbs hung like falling stars across the snow, so that when my family's cars climbed the hill, they would see the lodge glowing like a beacon. But the most important thing to me wasn't the lights or the tree. It was the small gifts waiting in each guest room. I wanted every person, the moment they opened the door, to feel a touch that whispered, "We thought of you." For Theo, I placed a large hardcover photo book of American mountain photographers, the crisp scent of new pages still fresh. For Aunt Camille's children, I prepared STEM toys, a robot building kit, and a miniature microscope, something they could play with and learn from at the same time. On Nana Ruth's bed, I laid a warm beige hand-woven blanket, folded neatly beside a small vial of lavender oil to help her sleep. For each person, I wrote a simple handwritten card with the same message: "Happy Thanksgiving in our home." I walked down the hallway as everything slowly came together, my hand brushing against the rough pine walls, and in my chest swelled a feeling I hadn't tasted in years. Genuine anticipation for the holiday. No longer was I afraid of being left out, no longer waiting for a message that decided my place. This time, I was the one in control. I was the one opening the doors. I was the one rewriting the story. And I wanted to be sure that when each bedroom door opened, when every pair of eyes looked around in wonder, everyone would feel seen, called by name, and truly belonging to this place. On Thanksgiving afternoon, the sky over Jackson Hole turned a shade of silvery gray, snow falling thick over the mountain slopes, reflecting the golden lights I had strung along the lodge's roofline. I stood on the porch, a heavy coat over my shoulders, both hands wrapped around a steaming mug of hot cider, the scent of apple and cinnamon filling the air. From a distance, I heard the low hum of engines, then the crunch of tires pressing into packed snow. A line of SUVs wound their way up the twisting road, headlights cutting through the icy mist. My heart pounded fast, caught between nerves and exhilaration. This was the moment my family would see, for the very first time, the world I had quietly built. The first car pulled up. The door swung open, and Theo stepped out, his old puffer jacket puffing against the cold, his breath curling white in the air. He looked up, eyes wide at the glowing lodge, its timber and glass walls reflecting golden light. "Oh my God, Ava," he exclaimed, his voice a mix of awe and mock reproach. "You built an entire universe and didn't say a word?" I laughed, running to wrap him in a hug. "Surprised enough yet?" He shook his head, his eyes still locked on the towering, glittering tree behind the glass. "Surprise doesn't even begin to cover it. This is unbelievable." The other cars followed close behind. Aunt Camille stepped out holding a tray of steaming pumpkin pie, her eyes brimming with tears. Uncle Darrell let out a long whistle, waving his arm at the golden lights wrapped around the balcony. "Ava, are you trying to open a whole resort?" he teased. The kids tumbled out, skipping across the snow, leaving a scatter of footprints before pressing their faces against the glass to marvel at the 12-foot tree glowing in the great hall. Inside, Harper the chef was already waiting with trays of appetizers. Wedges of smoked cheese, butter-toasted walnuts, and steaming cups of hot cider. The sweetness of apples and spice mingled with the scent of firewood drifting out from the hearth, wrapping around everyone as if welcoming them home. Inside the lodge, the air came alive the moment the wooden door shut behind us. Eli, my cousin, dropped onto a bench and pulled out his acoustic guitar, strumming the first chords. The children burst into laughter, chasing one another down the hallway, clapping along to the rhythm. The floorboards groaned beneath quick footsteps, blending with the crackle of logs in the fireplace. Firelight danced across faces, warming the cheeks of the young and casting a golden shimmer over the lines on the elders' eyes. I paused for a moment, taking it all in, my chest tightening. For the first time in my life, my family was gathered in a space without a main table and a kids' table. Everyone sat together around the massive walnut table, long, solid, and wide enough for all. Chairs were lined up neatly, white tablecloths spread smooth, porcelain plates gleaming, and rows of wine glasses catching the glow of candlelight. Harper set the applewood smoked turkey down in the center of the table, the scent of smoke mingling with herbs, drawing a chorus of delighted gasps. Bowls of deep red cranberry compote passed from hand to hand, salt-crusted baked potatoes split open, releasing billows of steam and rich aroma. No one needed a long speech, just the ringing sound of cheers as glasses clinked beneath the soaring wooden beams. Laughter, stories, the shouts of children calling one another, all of it blended into a single symphony of connection. I looked around and saw people truly talking, truly listening, without the strained politeness that used to hover over family dinners. When Harper brought out the wild blueberry pie, its buttery crust crisp and fragrant, Nana Ruth, sitting beside me, reached for my hand. Her thin fingers radiated a warmth that startled me, and her voice, trembling yet clear, whispered, "You gave Thanksgiving back to this family." The words caught in my throat, blurring my vision, and I only nodded, letting the weight of her sentence spread through my chest like a gentle fire, warmer than any hearth in the lodge. Laughter echoed through the room and soon spilled onto phone screens. One person snapped a picture of the turkey, another recorded the kids singing by the fire. The family group chat lit up, filled with photos, videos, heart emojis, and cheers. Some even posted stories, the 12-foot tree touching the ceiling, the feast, laden table, the glass walls opening to the snow-covered Tetons sparkling outside. For a moment, I felt a pang, realizing those images were spreading and knowing others would surely see them. But then I let it go. Because I understood that if anyone stumbled across those posts, they would know one undeniable truth. Thanksgiving had truly happened this year, and it no longer lived in the old house in Tulsa. It lived here, in this lodge, where everyone had finally come together to create a celebration anyone would dream of belonging to. The next morning, just as I woke to silver light streaming through the frost-covered windows, my phone began to buzz nonstop. The screen lit up with 11 missed calls from my mother, 6 from my father, and 1 new message from Sloan. I hesitated for a moment before opening it. Cheap move, Ava. Really cheap. I thought you'd be bigger than this. I exhaled slowly, set the phone down, and poured myself a glass of water. But then the phone rang again this time. It didn't stop. I answered, and my mother's voice burst through like an icy wind. Ava, what on earth are you doing? Why is the whole family at your place? Who gave you permission to host your own Thanksgiving? I stayed silent, my eyes drifting to the fireplace where Nana Ruth sat in her armchair, wrapped in a wool blanket, listening intently. She lifted her head and gestured for me to put the call on speaker. I obeyed. My father's voice came through next, heavy with reproach. You've made us look like we were abandoned. The whole neighborhood, the entire church is talking about it. Do you have any idea how much shame you've brought on this family? I pressed my lips together, but before I could speak, Nana Ruth set her teacup down, her eyes glowing with a rare fire. Robert, Linda, she began, her voice slow but resolute. You have neglected her for years. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, everything has revolved around Sloan. Ava has never had a true place at your table. And today, for the first time, she forgot no one. She opened her doors to everyone. And you dare to scold her for that? The room fell silent. On the other end of the line, only heavy breathing and the scrape of a chair could be heard. I could almost picture my mother glancing at my father, searching for a defense. At last, he muttered. That's not fair to say, Mother. My mother added quickly, her voice much softer now. We never meant to hurt Ava. We only thought this year would be easier if we kept things small. Small? Nana lifted an eyebrow, her hand trembling but steady. Small by cutting out half the family? Don't make excuses. This isn't about arrangements. This is about who is valued and who is not. Her words struck like a hammer, and I felt every vein in my chest tighten. I had never dared to say those things to them, but today she had spoken for me, and in front of everyone. A long silence swallowed the call. My mother said nothing more, my father let out a weary sigh, and then the conversation ended with a sharp click. I set the phone down, my heart not exactly light, but no longer trembling as before. For the first time, the favoritism had been dragged into the light not by me, but by the one person they would never dare to argue with. But before I could even exhale, the phone lit up again, this time with a flood of messages in the extended family group chat. Photos and videos from last night's dinner had spread farther than I expected. An aunt from Dallas wrote, "We're on our way, we can't miss this." An uncle in Colorado added, "If Ava's opening her doors, then that's where we'll be this year." Car emojis, plane emojis, red hearts filled the screen one after another. I glanced at Mason, the lodge manager, who was checking the wood supply. He shrugged with a grin. "Looks like we're about to have even more company." That afternoon, another line of cars wound its way up the snowy slope. The lodge doors opened to a chorus of greetings and laughter. But at the same time, my phone rang again. It was my mother, her voice tight with suppressed anger. "You're making us into a joke. People are going to your house instead of ours. Do you think that's something to be proud of?" I didn't answer. I simply looked out at the porch, where the children were playing in the snow and the fire crackled steadily in the hearth. I knew there was no need to argue anymore. The line had been drawn. This table was mine, and those who truly wanted to be present had already found their way here. That evening, the lodge glowed like a massive ember in the snow-covered valley. From a distance, the wide glass windows poured out golden light, reflecting across the drifts in shimmering streaks, as if 1,000 candles were burning. Inside, the scent of pine logs crackling in the fireplace mingled with the rich aroma of red wine, and faintly in the air drifted the sweetness of Harper's freshly baked pies. Eli's guitar strummed gently, keeping rhythm with the children's laughter as they ran down the hall, their small feet drumming merrily against the wooden floor. Harper carried out a tray of wild blueberry pies, their golden crusts cracking open to release the buttery fragrance of cinnamon and sugar. Everyone's eyes lifted, inhaling deeply, while the children crowded around, eyes wide and sparkling, their excitement spilling over into squeals. The adults laughed at their eagerness, warmth spreading across every face. In her leather armchair, Nana Ruth sat with a wool blanket across her lap, her clouded eyes shining with rare joy. She chuckled as the little ones showed off their clumsy tricks, one twirling like a ballerina, another trying to sing along with the guitar but hopelessly off-key. The whole room erupted with laughter, and in that moment I felt the years of distance melt away, as though the cracks that had once divided us had fused together again in the firelight of this night. On the long walnut table, the plates were nearly empty, though bowls of bright red cranberries still gleamed. A few cracked, steaming baked potatoes lingered, and wine glasses shimmered with candlelight. Everyone sat shoulder to shoulder, pressed close, no one set apart by invisible kids' tables anymore. Voices overlapped. Aunt Camille retelling the long drive to get here, Uncle Ray cracking a joke that sent the whole table into laughter, while Theo raised his glass once more, shouting cheers, simply because he didn't want the joy to end. In that atmosphere, I felt as if I had stepped into the warm family movie I had wished all my life to be part of. And this time, I was at the center not because someone gave me a seat, but because I had built the table myself. I glanced briefly at the phone, lying on the table. The screen kept lighting up, more than 20 missed calls from my mother, a flood of messages from my father, and sharp, bitter words from Sloan. "You're making the family look bad. This is betrayal. Cheap stunt." The words cut like familiar knives. But this time, they carried no weight. I placed the phone face down, drew a deep breath, and lifted my head to the room glowing before me, where guitar chords, laughter, and the gentle clink of silverware blended together as one. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty, I was exactly where I belonged. That night, the family group chat lit up again, but this time, not with anger. Messages poured in like rain, Photos of everyone gathered around the long table, clips of the children singing by the fire, shots of the towering tree draped in golden lights. Aunt Camille wrote, "Ava should host Thanksgiving next year." Uncle Ray chimed in, "Exactly. We found a new tradition." Theo added a fire emoji and typed, "This tradition is just getting started." I laughed through tears, and when someone renamed the group chat the Lodge family, I knew that this moment would live on. All my life, the family table had revolved around Sloane and my parents. Every glance, every compliment, every story flowed toward them. I was only the shadow, sitting at the side table, quietly eating and waiting for a moment to be acknowledged. But now, the center had shifted. No longer was it about Sloane in the middle seat, no longer about my parents deciding who was worthy. The center was now the people who truly showed up, those who chose to be here with me in this lodge. I stepped onto the balcony, snow still drifting down, the Tetons standing tall under the dim glow of the moon. Through the glass, I could see everyone still deep in conversation around the massive walnut table. I closed my eyes, drew in the sharp cold air, and in that moment, I felt a truth I had never dared to believe in 31 years. I was seen. A moment later, the glass door behind me creaked softly. The faint groan of hinges, then the slow, steady footsteps of Nana Ruth on the wooden floor. She wore a wool shawl draped around her shoulders, her frame thin but steady, and her aging eyes shone brighter than the moon spilling across the valley. "You know, Ava," she began, her voice low and warm, rough yet steady. "I've waited for this moment a very long time. All my life, I've seen the family gather, but never once have I seen us sit together as equals. You've done something I never dared to believe was possible." She paused, her thin hand resting lightly on the icy railing before she leaned over to take mine. "From the time you were little, I saw the way your eyes searched for a seat, searched for recognition. I want you to know, it was never your fault. It was us, this family, that lost you for too long. But tonight, you've proven that strength doesn't come from being given a place. It comes from building a table long enough for everyone to sit together, and I am proud of you for not closing the doors, but opening them to all who truly value being here." Tears stung my eyes, hot against the mountain wind. I wrapped my arms around her, feeling that frail yet unyielding body tremble slightly in my embrace. When I pulled back, she was smiling, her eyes glimmering with moonlight. "You don't have to fear being forgotten anymore. From now on, when anyone asks where our family's Thanksgiving is held, the answer will be, in the place you built." She turned back inside, leaving me standing on the balcony, my hand still warm from her touch. My heart felt still, yet at the same time opened into a new space, a space where I was truly seen, and where I knew I was no longer alone. The next morning, as the first sunlight spilled over the snow-covered valley, the lodge began to stir with the sounds of voices and laughter as everyone prepared to leave. I stood on the wooden porch, wrapped in a shawl, watching the line of cars wind their way down the slope, and a deep sense of peace rose within me. Aunt Camille came up and hugged me tightly, her eyes shining with tears. "Thank you, Ava. This year, we had a real Thanksgiving." Uncle Darrell clapped me hard on the shoulder, laughing heartily. "You made us feel more welcome than ever before." The children rushed toward me, each throwing their arms around me, their voices bubbling. "Next year we're coming back, okay?" Theo was the last to step forward, his eyes bright in the cold, his smile unable to hide the pride in it. "You did something no one thought possible. You showed us all the true meaning of belonging." I embraced him, no words needed, because everything was already spoken in our shared glance. One by one, the SUVs rolled away, their tracks pressed deep into the fresh snow. Windows cracked open, hands waved out, voices calling, "Bye, Ava," echoing into the crisp mountain air, blending with the whistle of the wind and the cry of the birds overhead. I stood still on the porch, smiling as I watched them go, my heart glowing as if a fire roared inside it. This was not just a farewell, it was the beginning of a new tradition. And in that moment, I understood that for the first time in many years, I had truly kept my family close by opening the doors of the lodge, and even more, by opening the doors of my heart. Still, a hollow space remained inside me. I knew that to finally close the old cycle, I had to face my parents and Sloane directly, not in a heated phone call, not through sharp words in a text message, but in a small evening, face to face, where I could finally speak everything I had carried in silence for so many years. A week after the whole extended family had left the lodge, I called my mother, my voice calm, almost distant. "Tonight, can you, Dad, and Sloane come to the lodge? Just the four of us. No noise, no one else." On the other end, there was a pause, then my mother answered softly, "All right." By dusk, with snow falling lightly, their SUV climbed the hill and stopped in front of the porch. I opened the door myself. Sloane stepped in first, her designer coat fitted snugly, her eyes wavering, though she tried to mask it with composure. My mother followed, clutching a small bag to her chest, and my father looked around silently, saying nothing. I invited them to the table, this time without extravagance, only a simple dinner, pumpkin soup, toasted bread, and a bottle of red wine I had been saving. We sat down, the air heavy as mountain fog. I poured wine for each of them, then began, my voice steady, neither trembling nor harsh. "I didn't invite you here to argue. I just want you to hear at once all of it, to hear what it was like growing up, to hear how I felt." I told them, detail by detail, slice by slice of memory. Christmas at 14 without a gift, the science award overshadowed by Sloane's debate trophy, the dinners where I was pushed to the kids' table, the times I spoke of my work only for the whole family to turn and praise my sister instead. I didn't accuse, I didn't shout. I simply recounted, in an even tone, as though reading aloud a memoir whose main character had finally stepped free from the page. My mother lowered her head, her hands clasped tightly together. My father tried to interrupt once or twice, but fell silent each time he met my steady gaze. And Sloane, so used to being the center of every room, sat there unable to find words. I watched her shift uncomfortably, her eyes dropping to the tablecloth, for the first time unsure how to spin the moment in her favor. When I finished, the room grew so quiet I could hear the logs snapping in the fireplace. After a long pause, my father sighed. "Maybe, we just didn't see it." My mother nodded faintly, her voice trembling. "We never meant to hurt you. But now I understand." It wasn't an apology, not yet, but it was the first step, a crack in the wall that had stood solid for so many years. I nodded, not expecting more, at least not tonight. The dinner ended in silence, but it was no longer the cold silence of years past. They rose to leave, and as they stepped out the door, Sloane turned back. Her eyes flickered with hesitation. She said nothing, only gave a small nod before walking away. I stood watching her go, knowing that her power to command every room was no longer absolute. The balance had shifted, and I no longer needed to win or lose against her. I only needed to stand firm in my own place. On the final night, as the lodge sank back into silence, I stood before the wide glass windows, watching snow fall thick outside, blanketing the porch and the distant mountains in white. I lifted my glass of wine and whispered softly to myself, "I don't need to wait for anyone to give me a seat. I built the table and the doors are open to those who know how to value it." The words vanished into my breath, yet their echo inside me was louder than any applause I had ever longed for. My phone buzzed with a new message. I opened it to see a line from Nana Ruth. "Next year, my old seat will be right beside you." I laughed, my lips salty with tears, yet my heart felt light as air. That short message closed a long journey from the child once pushed away from the table to the woman who had built one of her own. I knew the story wasn't finished, that crack still remained, but now I held the power of choice. And, above all, I was no longer a shadow, I had become the one who opened the doors. If you are listening to this story, I want to leave you with something simple. Sometimes we are not chosen for the seat we deserve. Family, society, or anyone at all may make you feel small, forgotten, or not enough. But your worth has never depended on whether others let you sit down. You can build a table of your own, one where you are respected, one where you decide who belongs. Do not wait for anyone to open the door for you. Open it yourself, Do not wait for recognition before you begin to live. Live now, build now, and prove it through your own resilience. One day, when you look back, you will see every wound you thought would break you was in fact the fuel that built a life no one can take away. And remember this, you are not alone. If you have ever felt excluded, let this be your reminder. You are strong enough to create a world where you truly belong. And when you do, you will realize your value never needed permission from anyone.